My first child made me feel the experience that any father should experience. The first cry of their child wanting their parent made me clench my wife's hand as she did to I. The feeling we experienced followed, but kept on multiplying as we welcomed the next two joys of our world. Not one moment passed as we kept the same euphoric feeling that we had from the first three. We were ready for another child. We prepared for the birth of child 4 through the 36-week period that was counting down quickly. I share these hopes with two hopes. First, for fathers, to help them experience the joys of the world. And secondly, to help mothers begin to understand and relate to their partners when sometimes things don't go as planned. According to the Mayo Clinic in September of 2023, 10 to 20% of women accounted for in the United States hospital setting experience a miscarriage. Another 10% are not accounted for. While much of the discussion is placed on the physical and emotional toll it takes on women, it is crucial to consider the impact on men. Fathers-to-be often face significant emotional distress due to their child being lost at birth. Yet their feelings can be deemed. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, 66.3% of men suffer from psychiatric distress due to their child being lost at birth. Men may experience feelings of sadness, guilt, helplessness, and anxiety, yet societal norms often discourage them from openly expressing themselves. As a result, many men suffer in silence without the emotional support they need to cope with their grief. This is a message for those that know the pain. A Father's Memoir of Miscarriage by Eric Scrudemacher. I'd watched the full process of childbirth 4 different times without quenching or flinching. As a pastor, I'd witnessed some gruesome things next to hospital bedsides. Yet, I could not bring myself to sit next to my wife as this had happened. I opted to sit against the wall behind her. Even then, as I sat there, the doctor made preparations, and anxiety, nausea, dizziness crept through my gut, through my chest, and into my head. I told her that I couldn't stay, and I exited to the waiting room. You know, maybe the reason why we were in such joy to see our children was because despite arriving pale and blue with the umbilical cord clenching a death grip on our babies, we felt the appreciation to have our babies here with us. And I ended up finding an empty chair in the waiting room, hoping to avoid being seen by others. My plan failed. Instead, a chatty guest took a seat next to me and started conversation. You call yourself a father? What kind of father leaves, abandons his wife in the midst of her suffering and makes her endure alone? What kind of pathetic wimp can't even hold his wife's hand as she goes through this? You call yourself a man? You're just a disappointing nuisance. Out came running comparison. A ruthless enemy. Comparison is quick to use your family, your wife, your children, and your friends against you. Whispering quiet tones that spoke louder than the mighty cries of the children we have with us today. As my wife wiped cold ultrasound gel from her stomach and hot tears from her cheeks, all I can see is that peanut-shaped body settled at the bottom of her uterus. Shame darted in and out, chiding me for my inability to help my wife, to give input and counsel on the particulars of women's health that I simply did not understand. Now, shame insisted that I had failed my wife, failed my children, failed my God. The doctor suggested that we'd be able to hold the baby after delivery, something that me and my wife both wanted. And at 4:40 p.m., turned onto her side. She felt a gush of fluid. Our 4.5-inch, 0.8-ounce baby was born. We were alone, the three of us, as our baby lied there on the bed. My instincts told me to pick up the baby and cradle its fragile body, to not let it lie there alone. But I didn't. What would the nurses say if they found me holding the baby? Won't they think that's odd? Shame whispered, "Look at your baby, lying there helpless and alone. What kind of father just lets his baby lie there?" And the doctor, concerned about my wife, rushed her to the operating room for a D&C, the very procedure that we wished to avoid. And I waited there, frightened and ashamed. A dear friend, a nurse, who happened to be on duty, brought the baby to us. The soft, underdeveloped skeletal structure collapses as the fluids dry. We cradled the little blanket in our hands, unfolding its edges to reveal our little one's eyes, still fused shut, a delicate nose, and a dainty mouth. We touched skinny arms and legs, counting perfect fingers and toes. The head nurse had made efforts to accommodate our circumstances before we arrived. My wife would not have to pass the nursery rooms with congratulation signs and balloons on their doors. Instead, a single rose taped to the doorframe explained our situation to entering nurses. But the process did not seem to consider the father. How can I talk to my wife about my loss? How do we mourn the anniversaries of the individuals that the community never met? How can I sit here and call myself a father after my inability to understand and relate to my wife? I can't get a grasp on what I should or shouldn't feel because I have no one to talk to. What's a man to do? Shortly after I started my new job in the area, my wife confided in a few groups of friends. I stayed silent. Shame was whispering, "They didn't hire you so that you could go on and carry your sorrows. If you share this, you'll just be another disappointing nuisance." Well, my wife and I, we have 9 children. But if you met us, we'll only say that we have 5. That's because we've only ever met 5. We've only ever named 5. The 5 who took breaths. The 5 we brought home. 4 of our children died by miscarriage. As with most suffering, I did not expect to experience it personally. Miscarriage seemed to be before it happened to us. Solely a woman's experience. A mother's sorrow. Now I know differently. Mothers hurt, and fathers hurt too.